this time, can we please stand and trust the flag? I pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
I'm going to start with Academics Committee. Ms. Price?
Okay.
That's right.
Yes, okay. Yes, so anyway, come on up, but you can get the registration update, right?
Sure, yes. What I wanted to do this evening is just give you a kindergarten registration update, let you know what's going on. You see the a portion that I sent to you in a briefing, but I just wanted to state it for the public. On Saturday, June 13th, we will hold our last kindergarten registration session. After that time, all kindergarten students will be going to central registration to register for kindergarten. Through our transition meetings that we've had this year in consulting with our preschool teachers as well as our kindergarten teachers, we have about 180 children that are still out there in the neighborhoods that have not yet registered. So we sent 180 letters to those families inviting them to a session on June 13th where we hope to be able to register those students for kindergarten so that by the time we roll into the summer, we have a very good indication as to how many kindergarten children will be in our schools to start the 15-16 school year. So we are getting good results. Families are contacting Sue Otranto to establish their hour of registration for the 13th of June. So we are excited about that happening in one of our schools, and that is for all elementary schools, not just those that will be attending Paxos. Any questions about kindergarten registration?
So 7-8 update?
Yes, hi. Good evening, everyone. I provided all of you with a postcard and an actual trifold. This is just a preview. It's not the actual final product. And as Mr. Daniel has pointed out, it does need to be a little bit bigger in font, etc. But I wanted to provide you something, put this in your hands so you see what's going out to our cyber school parents. And if you notice, May 28th is our meeting. That's our kickoff meeting with DLN. And it'll be the 7-8 Eastern Area Middle School Library. And the postcard is what the parent will receive. Again, this is not the final product. It's something that I was able to print out, preview, and we're still kind of editing it with DLN. But I wanted you to at least see what the parents are going to receive. And this goes out to all of our cyber school students that we have currently. The brochure is a trifold. And the trifold will be in our principal's offices, our assistant principal's offices, the main office, and guidance offices in our districts. This is for informational purposes, obviously, for our students, and especially for those that come in and say, you know, I'm not really thinking I'm doing as well as I want to do in school. I want to go to cyber school for whatever reason. If they want to leave the brick and mortar school, Easton School District, at least we have a trifold brochure, and we can explain it to the child that we are providing our own cyber school program in Easton. So I just wanted to give you a quick preview of that, and know that our first kickoff date is May 28th. I'll have possibly a guidance counselor there. We'll have central registration there to start registering our parents. I will be there. Jamie Behringer from DLN will be there, and we'll be explaining the whole program. Any questions on cyber school? I'll try to give you monthly updates on that. Yes?
Just one question. Thank you.
Sure.
Everything sounds wonderful. I don't see the cyber update on the agenda. Is that my agenda, or is there do I have the wrong one? Or?
That was part of the K-12 update.
The K-12 AI update?
Yes.
No, that's fine. I just wanted to make sure, because whatever we discuss, I want to make sure the public knew about it. But as part of that, that's fine.
So we're good. There. Okay.
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 That's what it's under. All right.
Great. Thank you.
Thank you.
I wanted to update you all on our science curriculum writing. We are ready to begin the curriculum rewrite for grades 5, 6, 7, 8, and 9. I will be providing curriculum hours this summer for approximately 14 teachers in grades 5 through 9. We will be using Title II funds to pay for their curriculum writing, and the new courses will not actually begin until the 16-17 school year. So we're going to begin the curriculum writing process, go through all of next year, and continue refining the curriculum, and have the product in our curriculum presented to the principals, myself, to review, and actually Mr. Steckel and then Ms. Piazza, and to approve for the following school year. Any questions about our curriculum writing? I've kind of been giving you updates all along about this. I just wanted to tell you where we're at with it. Okay. And that's all I have for this evening. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay. Are there any questions? Any questions? Well, we spoke about kindergarten registration, and there'll be a meeting on June 13th about the last kindergarten registration and the cyber school update. And science curriculum writing will be happening this next year, and then we'll start the 2016-2017 school year with the new curriculum writing. And that's
I'm sorry, go ahead.
Oh.
I apologize, I jumped the gun. Go ahead. What do you have?
No, that was it. Okay, what were you saying?
Is that it for academics?
No, we actually
Oh,
have
actually.
two on the right.
That's why I'm just a little lost with my
sorry.
agenda.
I'm going to because I didn't see it.
I have letter B, summer learning,
I did not, for some reason, I'm missing.
with Miss Amelia and then
I'm
we have
missing.
Mr.
Ah, okay,
Reinhardt
here we
on
go.
the
I
calendar.
was missing it. That was the problem.
Okay.
I thought it was a little short, but I was missing it. Okay, Miss Amelia, go ahead.
Okay. I just wanted to provide a brief update to the board about the summer learning programs that we will have in the district this year. Summer learning has been an area of focus in the education world because the focus is on students with the potential for summer slide, where students are losing the skills that they've gained throughout the school year. So it's very important to continue to provide high-quality summer learning opportunities to our students throughout the summer. Historically, we've done so with Summer Sizzle, which is a partnership through Project of Easton and the Easton Area School District. And that program is going to continue again this year, which is a 5-week program for our at-risk, low-income students in order to build literacy skills. In addition to that program this year, we are also doing a number of other initiatives. We have a program called Camp Invention, which will be coming to our district the week of June 2nd, or 22nd, I should say. And that focuses on STEM-related activities, providing students with real-world problem-solving and critical thinking skills in a collaborative environment. We're also partnering with the community college, Northampton Community College. Northampton Community College operates a huge summer learning program on their community college site called Horizons for Youth. But we've been able to partner with them during 4 weeks through the summer, where they are going to offer programs, 2 programs, each of those 4 weeks, for a total of 8 programs this summer here in our Easton Area School District schools. So they will rotate through 4 of our different elementary schools, offering programs such as Draw, Paint, and Sculpt, Ooey Gooey Science, Sports Fun, and Detective Science. The students will be broken into K-2 and grades 3 and 5 for those programs. And as I said, each of them happening 2 per week for 4 weeks. Additionally, we also, in addition to Sizzle, we also have a week during the week of July 13th, we have a day camp that is put on by our own Easton Area School District Music Department. And last year, there were over 100 grades 4 and 5 students that participated in that program. That will be offered again this summer at Easton Area Middle School. And our teachers, through our music department, they volunteer their time in order to run that program, which I think is pretty commendable. In addition to that, we also have an ESL day camp at Shawnee Elementary School for our Shawnee Elementary ESL students. And that, again, is put on by one of our ESL teachers, Sandra Morissette, who, again, is doing that as a volunteer for 3 weeks out of the summer. And she has 2 of our high school students assisting her with that as volunteers for that program. So a number of different learning opportunities happening across the district for our students this summer in an effort to continue to provide that high quality instruction throughout the summer months. And as I said at the last meeting, not necessarily instructionally focused, but we are also offering the summer food service program this year, which will be at Paxinosa and Cheston Elementary Schools. That is for any student who is a low-income student within our school district, grades K to 12. So any student qualifying for free or reduced lunch during the school year will be able to come to Paxinosa or Cheston and receive a free lunch between the hours of 11:30 and 12:30 on Mondays through Thursdays throughout the summer from June 22nd through August 13th. Letters have already been sent home to all of the families who would qualify, and we're getting some responses back that parents and students are interested. And the volunteers that we have providing supervision at those sites are our EAEA Teachers Union, our Bus Drivers Association, the Eastern Area School District Administration, and also Communities and Schools of the Lehigh Valley and Family Connection, two of our partners within our school district. So a number of different constituents coming together to volunteer their time in order to provide that lunch program throughout the summer months. So that is happening as well in the summer of 2015. Were there any questions? All right, that's great. Thank you.
Thank you, Alyssa. One of the things I would just add to this is that we've been trying to join together all of these efforts into one clearinghouse, if you will, and hopefully we'll be. Did we send anything out yet to parents with all of these listed? Yes. So parents, will have an opportunity to see all these things offered, and we're really pleased with that because we're not positioned to be able to offer summer learning opportunities financially, as you well know. So, we're looking for opportunities to partner, and we found those, and we're really pleased with those. So I think it's going to be a good first coordinated opportunity for us to impact on that special population of kids. So, good.
So next we have the Eastern Area School District calendar.
Yes, I provided everybody with a calendar that we had adopted. I would like to suggest a change, and that change, I believe, reflects the sentiment of the community in general. I would like to ask the board to approve changing a March 24th to an instruction day. That would be the Thursday before, the first day of spring break, the Thursday before Easter. I would like to have on our calendars Veterans Day as a day without school classes or instruction. So, if you recall, this past fall there was a number of people that really thought that was an appropriate thing for the schools to do, was recognize and honor veterans with having a day off. And this would be one way that we could do that. Now, on the downside, it eliminates a makeup day for snow, because I've used that in the last 2 years. But in the bigger scheme of things, it's probably far more important for us to have that day off for kids as a holiday to honor our veterans. Activities for veterans will continue in our schools, I'm sure, on the day before, and we'll have the day off. Yep.
John, are the rest of the schools that we're associated with through the CIT doing the same thing?
Some have and some haven't. It's a mixed bag, and I've tried very hard to see if we could get together on these days, but it's almost impossible. It used to be that we could pretty much work together on developing those within the IU consortium, or the CIT consortium, but it's not like that much anymore. I think everybody has their own ideas about when the community wants time off, and So some build a longer spring break in, some don't. Some have a Veterans Day, some don't. I note that this past year, Nazareth eliminated Thanksgiving, the Monday after Thanksgiving, as a part of the holiday, and I was very surprised to hear that, because that's pretty much been the custom and tradition in this area, and it didn't seem to be a problem for people. So either way, there weren't many. I guess there wasn't an outcry of parents say, gee, we want our kids in school, but there also wasn't an outcry of parents saying we need to have that day off, and the hunters didn't seem to be too fussed up about it, so I was very surprised.
And again, I'm looking at it because, so just so everybody's aware, so if we're closed, CIT is open, what do we do?
If we're closed, and there has to be 3 of the 5 that are closed, and so I believe that Nazareth uses it as an in-service day. Nazareth may do that. But if we're closed, we're the only one closed, then CIT is open for business. There are 3 other districts closed, and
right. But do we bus our students then to CIT?
No.
That's,
no.
Any questions about this calendar or anything? No?
Thank you, Ms.
Okay.
Number 3, policy, Mr. Schneider.
Ms. Price, open for public comment.
Yes, it is.
Yes.
Okay, I'm sorry, Mr. Okay, policy. Mr. Freund, it looks like you have policy 907 and 916 are looking at being revised. And so I noticed one of these policies was a lot longer than the old version. The other one seems to be a new number. Perhaps summarize this one.
Yeah, both these policies required revision in light of particularly Act 153, which is the act which under the Child Protective Services Law, not under the school code, but under the Child Protective Services Law, requires certain background checks for individuals, even individuals who are not necessarily employees, but who actually be volunteers. This is an area that causes a lot of confusion. That's because the way the statute is written is extremely confusing. But if you take a look particularly at, it would be, I know the question, I guess that's not school volunteers.
916 volunteers.
616, for some reason not 6014. You'll see that there are a number of changes with regard to what is required of a volunteer. And I had this discussion earlier with Dr. Gilligan. We talked for some time, and in fact I can tell you that Act 153, as well as similar acts coming in what I call the post-Sandusky era, have imposed a number of requirements, both in terms of mandatory reporting of child abuse and certification of school employees, independent contractors, and volunteers. Sometimes, if read literally, to the point where it might seem draconian. Number 916 now, in essence, what it does is it sets up what's called an approved volunteer status. And an approved volunteer is a volunteer who would essentially require background checks. What's an approved volunteer? Well, a volunteer is someone who, and looking now at page 204 on 916, who, in their duties as volunteers, are responsible for the welfare of one or more students, or are in the care, control, or supervision of students, or, this is a two-part test, or volunteers who interact with students within the district on a 5 or more days per school year. Now, all of that is basically right out of the statute except for the 5 days. The challenge in crafting a policy like this is to try to take what the statute says, which basically is exactly what I've read, except for the 5 days. It just talks about volunteers who interact with students on actually the actual language is on a routine basis. And the question is, well, what does that mean? Well, the statute doesn't define it, the code doesn't define it. That's left up to the individual school boards to define what that routine interaction means. The first half of the definition basically is kind of a local parentis kind of thing, situation where a volunteer would have some control or direction over a student. The example I like to give, talked about with Dr. Gilligan at some length, was say an overnight chaperone or that kind of thing, or someone who would be working with a child or children continuously over some period of time. These volunteers are required to have background checks. Now, someone who comes in, reads a book for a day, helps out at a stand at a carnival for a day, something like that, in our opinion, does not qualify as an approved volunteer requiring all these background checks. But the thing of it is, it doesn't really say that anywhere in the law. So our challenge is to try to respect what the literal language of the statute says, while at the same time not reading it so literally that it essentially precludes any rational person from wanting to volunteer. That's sort of a roundabout explanation of the nature of these changes, particularly with 916. Bob, you had mentioned in tuberculin testing, you talked about that earlier. That's something new that's been around for a while. It's right out of the school code. I will note that this only applies to volunteers who would be working long periods of time, so at least 10 hours a week, not just for 1 week, but for ongoing weeks. And again, if these policies are not implemented with some sense of reasonableness, well, then they become highly restrictive and actually kind of self-destructive. On the other hand, if we don't have policies that reflect what state laws are, then we're not in compliance there either. Again, apropos of our conversation earlier, there are now a number of people that are realizing that there's a serious problem with how these laws are written, because the laws that are contained in the welfare laws, Children's Protective Services Law, don't necessarily coincide with what's in school code. Nor, in my understanding of the legislative history of this, was there much consultation between the Department of Welfare and the Department of Education. So you can see what has resulted. But what we proposed here is, as I explained, a volunteer. Everybody knows what a volunteer is. Somebody basically doesn't get paid, but an approved volunteer is what is really new here, and is what is an effort to comply with so-called Act 153, which is the amendments to the Child Protective Services.
John, I have
quite a few questions that go back to that.
Okay.
As you-
I probably have as many questions as you do, but I think that we should hear them out.
Yeah. So if you go backwards, go back to your tuberculin test. That's where you just ended. Okay. After the sentence about 10 or more hours per week and everything, the bottom line says all other volunteers must submit either proof of a negative. So, I mean, we haven't been doing that in the past at all. And so, where did that come from?
I don't know, but I don't think we put that in the note. I think that was John was working with it. John? I think that's an existing policy.
I don't believe so. We don't have an existing 917.
Until 916.
916, excuse me.
And we certainly don't require that.
The tuberculin,
no question.
that's in 907. It's in the tuberculin test.
907, but it says that
It's in 916 too.
in the code.
Oh, wait, section. Oh, what? This is wrong. This
For
is-
10 or more hours, we're saying, right?
Well, I think that was placed in there as kind of some kind of a reasonable gauge as to, what it says in the regulation and what is a reasonable practical thing to do. The 10 or more hours is not in the it's not the school code. It's the Department of Education regulations.
There's a clerical thing. That's what it's grouping.
So you're saying in the regulations it has that already?
It says 916 here, and I was looking on this page.
And
It
then
says 907.
it also
So
says in
it's
the regulations
clear.
10 or more school, 10 or more hours?
I don't think it says that. Let me pull that up again.
What would be nice, I mean, at this point, because of the questions and everything go through, it would be nice to come back with this policy at a future committee meeting with the items highlighted that are variable, that are not something law, such as you having up here up front where it's 5 days. Okay.
5 days is not in the law. No, 5 days is a recommendation that could be changed. I mean, it's up to you.
Where'd the recommendation come from?
Administrator.
mistake.
It was our belief that 5 is appropriate, more appropriate than 3.
The numbers are wrong.
Well, it may be more appropriate at 7 or 10, only because you start thinking about, and we hear the reports here all the time about book fairs.
Yes.
We hear, a different project going on over, that at the end of the school year or something at one of the holidays that's going on and everything. And when you start counting them up,
That's right.
you're probably at an easy 7, if not close to 10 types of events. And when you only get a limited number of people that come out, especially if they're participating through the PTA, maybe we have to look at it. I think there's a difference between and how you define reoccurring versus how you define those sporadic types of things. Because if you're doing a book fair, you're not necessarily even in a classroom. You may be standing in a lobby type where the classes are coming by, and yes, you see the same students, but that's a lot different than if you're volunteering that you're in the same classroom day after day.
Now, are you talking about tuberculin?
No.
No, I'm talking overall in general.
Fine.
So the tuberculin thing is one item.
Okay, but let me just say, if you go back and you look at the definition, listen, there's no question that this is confusing. But it's the best attempt to, it's a sincere attempt to try to put together something that works. But what you have to do is you have to go back and look and see whether or not that person at the book fair would really qualify as an approved volunteer. And you have to go and look back what the definition is. So is that person at the book fair either one, someone who is in loco parentis, which I will characterize those care, custody, control, supervision as loco parentis generally, or is it someone who interacts with students on a routine basis? That's what the law says. The 5 days or more is an effort to try to define that, because policy hopefully is going to try to do an operation.
Right, so that's what I'm saying. We should define the number of days a little bit better and talk about these things and get a little more input back on them. When you start looking at the types of events where the PTA brings people in all the time, that doesn't make it a routine basis. A routine is, every Friday I'm going to have this person in because of this going on. They're not there 10 hours a week, but they're there for 2 hours or an hour every Friday or Wednesday or whatever day. That's a routine.
Therein lies the confusion around this entire process, because what we were thinking about here is about parents who have several children in the district who may want to help out the Shawnee PTA, for example, with their book fair, but they may have a child at the middle school, and they may want to help there. And across the span of a school year, they may be providing more than 10 hours. However, the argument could be made, well, it's not routine. So, it's very convoluted.
And can this be changed? That's what I'm saying. What's variable and what's not? And you bring up a good point. Some parents may have one, but they may have 2, 3, or 4 children. And if they do, and they're in different grade levels, they ought to be able to help out based on what the turn it is, per se, at one of the other facilities. And that shouldn't be looked at as, okay, now it's 5 occurrences, because you're going to have an accounting nightmare to go with that as well.
It is an accounting nightmare. There's no question about this.
Should it be per building, per facility?
You know what? Nobody has the answers to your questions, but I suppose it could.
But what it is, what we're talking about is setting what the guidelines should be to be followed here. And so that's why I'm asking, what are the variables that we should look at?
I think that one of the things that was looked at that's behind some of the thinking, the extent that legislators think of, is with the notion of a routine involvement. It's the notion that with child abuse, there is often a grooming period that occurs. And so what I think was in part behind this notion of this routine interaction with kids was the notion that the potential user would have access to a child or children on a regular basis.
Okay.
So that only informs kind of the purpose, but in terms of how many days, other concrete definitions, there really aren't any offered by the statute.
Well, and John, no, I agree, and I understand that, and I think it's a matter of how we start to define that. Maybe another part of this definition is, if a parent says, yeah, I want to be there every Tuesday, that's one thing. If a teacher is requesting somebody to be there, that's another thing. If they're coming to assist the PTA on an event, that's a third type of situation. And that's what I'm getting at. But if somebody says, yeah, I think I ought to be at this class every day, every Wednesday or every second Wednesday, or that's pattern.
I'm a little different. I'm going to say something a little different than what we've heard. The policy, in my opinion, is to protect the student, right? Protect the children. And 5 days, 7 days, it's not really protecting the children in any way, in my opinion. Okay? You have a pedophile or anybody else in for 5 days, 7 days. We hope we don't, but we don't know. What about, and I was just thinking, what if you come in today and you want to volunteer, you have to do a background check. That's it. Whether it be 6 months, I know the PTA doesn't want to hear that, I know that, but as a parent, I don't just want anybody around my son for 5, 7 days, and unless you can personally vouch for that person, you're not saying that my child is going to be 100% safe around that person. But hear me out. You do your background check, but then you can volunteer as much as you want for 6 months, or however, whatever's determined. So if you come in today, you do your background check, and if you decide to come in next week or this or that, you do it. What I feel is we're trying to make it easy and a non-hassle for the parents. And that's great, because they do volunteer, we want to do that. But we shouldn't lose sight of what the policy is for. The policy, in my opinion, is to protect children. So if we say 5 days or 7 days, you're potentially letting in a pedophile or somebody else who might not take action within those 5 or 7 days, but might build up on one child for 5, 7 days and commit an act somewhere else. My opinion is you come in, you do your background check, $25, or 20 or 25, and you're good for a certain amount of time. 6 months, 8 months, a year, whatever it is. 3 years? Whatever it is. And then you can volunteer. Well, I wouldn't go 3, but And then you can volunteer with the PTA, with your teacher, with anything you want to do for that period of time.
And in any buildings. You could.
In any buildings. Because
Frank, if you want to go that route, I'd like to hear where the PTA stands on that, but at the same time then, I think that the district ought to pick up the cost of the test. And if they're willing to submit to being, going through this process, let the district pay the cost for all the people that are going to be volunteering.
Well, I was just going to say, the people that can afford it, let them afford it. The board can't, or the district can't pay for everybody. The parents that can't, let them plead their hardship.
Can't discriminate the difference, though.
How can't you? If it's a parent of a child who gets free and reduced lunch, we do it with everything else, right?
That's
Kids that get free and reduced
measure,
lunch, no, it's not.
I think some sort of hardship.
Because kids with free and reduced lunch get the ability to get certain things, right? So if a parent wants to volunteer and their child or family wants free or reduced lunch, maybe we help them out with that. But to do it for everybody, at the end of the day, are we the bad guys because we want them to pay? We're trying to protect their children too.
What are we looking at? Do we have 1,000 volunteers in the district?
It only takes one.
Well, no. I'm not saying that, Frank. I'm saying if we have 1,000, we're going to pay $25. It's $25,000.
48.
48.
And that's for 3 years, correct? That has to be done, that same standard applies for 3 years.
And one recommendation is PTAs could do fundraising to offset costs. Maybe not pay the whole freight, but pay some of it.
But the problem is, they're fundraising, first of all, they're looking to take the money and put it back into the programs.
No, it's
so now instead of
just
putting,
one thought, Bob, that
yeah.
maybe could
If you want the volunteers,
help.
they're not going to pay. You're not paying people. That's why you volunteers, because...
I just look at it. Yes, our volunteers are very important, and we admire and thank them for what they do. But when it comes down to, accommodating a volunteer and protecting a child, there's no comparison. There's no, there's not even a discussion. And if we lose volunteers, I hate to see that, but we need to protect our children. We look at the newspaper now, and obviously it was not a volunteer. I didn't say it was volunteer, Rudy. Okay? It was not a volunteer. But a 1-year-old gets, something happens. We don't know exactly what. Something happens in the bathroom. God forbid we bring a person in 5 days and something happens to one of our students. Because we decided to make it less of a hassle for parents to pay. I can't agree with any of it. Because I don't feel we're fully protecting our students.
Instructional, the one thing that I think is important, PTA is a factor and certainly provides lots of volunteer hours for us. But on the other side of it, there are many activities that teachers run that couldn't be done with kids without the assistance of a volunteer in the room. And a lot of those things will go. A lot of those activities will go because they can't be done with just one individual. I'm thinking of lots of art activities. We also have the whole realm of athletics. And we've got lots of volunteers who are engaged in that. Now, once again, it's hard to have a conversation about this because we're segmenting all these things and defining them all differently. So it's very hard to define the group of volunteers we're speaking of. But there is no question that if we ask people to absorb that $48, that's going to have a tremendously negative impact on parents who are able to volunteer and I think willing to volunteer.
Well, I think some of the people will probably already have it. Just in my experience, I've noticed that teachers themselves tend to volunteer more with their children's respective schools. So they teach in one district, and then they volunteer at their child's if they live in a different district. I do know that it seems to be teachers have a higher, because they like to do that. So they'll already have that clear. So at least if they're Pennsylvania, they're teaching in Jersey a little bit. The rules are with that. I think some people probably will go ahead and have to think about it. I'm getting into that. I'm paying for it myself just to have it out of the way.
John, you mentioned about how many hours about the volunteers put in. And if they're not putting them in, and they're not coming in, like Brian's saying, where would those hours? Either the programs go to nothing, okay, which can cut back on the fundraising because, okay, you can't have a book sale because you don't have the volunteers to do it. Nobody's going to be manning it. And now you've lost the fundraising money plus the volunteer assistance. I don't have, so when you look at it, as I said, and I just pulled a number out of the air, if I pull out a number of 1,000, and it costs us $48,000, do we not get more than that payback? In the services that they end up providing.
That's an excellent way, thought, and an excellent way to look at it, to see what the yield is, because the yield is probably in many cases almost immeasurable in terms of finances. But you're right. That's one way to look at it.
The district paying every benefit.
Yeah.
If I could add something too, that, part of whether or not these policies turn out to be too restrictive and therefore discourage volunteerism and jeopardize programs, I think lies in how the administration applies these definitions on an individual basis. For example, in my opinion, if someone volunteering at a book sale wouldn't qualify as a free volunteer. It has to be direct contact, direct interaction with children in order to qualify.
A person volunteering at a bookstore wouldn't interact with children?
Not in the way, in my opinion, not in the way that this anticipates.
Walmart cashier interact with children? They go in and buy things at stores. They interact with other people. Retail purchase.
I hate to make this difficult on one end, but on the other end, if you want to keep it easy, bottom line, when you have a volunteer coming in, you want to have a database where you record it in a person in the school, a person in the school, a person in the school. Other than that, you're going to be sitting there and saying, okay, now person A, what is the qualification on what category does this fall in, and what purpose are they serving today? Are they in the classroom? We don't want to make it an accounting nightmare to keep track of this either.
If you're coming into the school to do any type of that, you're going to be around students who's doing a background check. The board discussed it, Ms. Price, myself, Mr. Snyder. I'm not really around students, but if I go into a building, we're getting them too. So I think it's good to have, for anybody that's going to interact with the school on any level at any time.
And one thing I'd say, I think it's relatively quick. I did the child experience one myself the other day, which is a matter of hours, to everything was done. And then I didn't do the state police one, but my wife said she already did hers. She said it was relatively quick. So even if something comes up where somebody wants to volunteer at the harvest party or something, and it's 2 days away, and they don't have a parents, they could probably get it relatively quickly as well. It's a lot faster than it used to be. So.
2 are instant, Act 34 and 151 are both instantly done on your computer, but the FBI clearance is not.
Okay.
So that
I didn't do the
requires you to
FBI
go
one. Okay.
get a fingerprint.
Okay. So that one, okay, thank you for clarifying. I didn't go through that one yet. I just went first through. Okay, thank you.
Technically, Act 51 is
34
34
and 151.
is 151 technically.
Well, I call them the child abuse and criminal.
Okay, so it needs some instructions. This is the first reading, Brian?
Yeah, this is the first reading.
Okay, so I think it's certainly legitimate that people have a lot of questions about this because it's definitely a departure from in the case of past.
I think it'd be interesting too once we get down to public to be heard to hear if the PTA has anything to say on the subject and their comments at that point, because I think that can play into. So I don't think, Brian, I would see this moving on. Would you?
I don't think so. I think we need to pay thing. We need to work it out. If we need to do a subsidy kind of thing or something, I would certainly look at that as a consideration to reworking this. The days thing, I know that's just pretty much arbitrary.
Yeah.
the number sounded fine to me. A clarification on it by Aaron there seemed to make sense. It wasn't the legislation. Yeah, she did easier.
Yeah, the board should know that the solicitors are advising 3. We believe 5 is appropriate. That's just reflects our belief. The other question I would offer up about time is would it be better to define it by hours, like 35 days times 7 hours of instruction would be 35 hours. Would that be in some ways easier for those people up to that 5 mark that we're going to use, or even if it's set at 3, is that somewhat easier and better for parents who have students in, I don't know. It's hard. It's probably harder to,
because it's usually not a long time for a lot of these.
No.
A few hours at the most, and then maybe that seems to make sense. I think in some regard. I don't.
Well, the different thing is, and this is a tougher one to say. Let's say the PTA pays for the clearances for the people. After, though, when they start to work X amount, we start to refund all that money. That way you don't get an overabundance of people coming out the way. But the thing is, you need the people sometimes. You may need 10 people for one event, and 6 of those don't have to work any other events of the year. That's the problem with doing that. But if you get to the point that you want to count how many times they come in, what would be interesting is how many hours are they there. Then you look at it and you can see what the benefit of this is. But the problem is you need a policy now to move ahead with. As I said, the problem is the PTA coming up with that kind of money initially. But how do you also watch? And I think from the PTA they have to tell us how many volunteers have you used in the last couple of years.
But I think you mentioned earlier about not having an accounting nightmare, but taking money, reimbursing money back. I mean, that's kind of.
That's what I'm here too.
Yeah,
so that's what I'm saying. But if we're brainstorming, just throwing different things out there to think about. Because what happens if you have everybody saying, "Yeah, I'm going to volunteer," and they never are used for anything, and all they did was get their clearances.
I would like to see, if we could, I'd like to see this get held to a jury. We heard from us, right, our opinion. We're going to hear the opinion of some PTA members and whoever else would like to speak. I'd like to see, Mr. Simonetta, if we can have Lieutenant Romali here at the next committee meeting, a person from the police department, to tell us their recommendation. Retired from Easton, now works for us, and see what his thought is and from a law enforcement stance.
I have a quick question for the PTA. Is that allowed in the bylaws to pay for child clearances? Because I know as a principal, you have certain bylaws you have to follow. Because I haven't followed them.
Our bylaws state that we have to use money that is used for the benefit of all children, right? So we wouldn't, for instance, be able to do something that specifically benefits some people. So, for example, right, sometimes this has come up that if that's in the family of my principal, or right, we want to honor that person, donate a library book, but we can't, right, because we're recognizing one person.
I know.
And so this runs into that easy line. I've asked that of our state representative, who says yes, but right. So yes, because the volunteer would be assisting all the children. Yeah. But there are other matters that come up for not other people. I mean, on the whole, I don't want to say we don't favor.
I can remember years ago, one of the most disappointing things for me as an elementary school principal was finding out PTA could not fund any more playground equipment because the mothership, the national group said to the locals, don't do it because of the liability that you would carry should there be an injury on those pieces of equipment. Now that makes sense to me, but that comes to mind now that if the PTA would pay for someone to come in our schools who has appropriate clearances, but suppose that individual would end up doing something very inappropriate, then are they placing themselves in great risk because they paid for that individual's clearances? I don't know the answer to that, but it just raises a question as whether or not PTA wants to get that involved in, in this kind of thing with monies. Question.
So maybe one last comment, or another comment anyway. The definition of what constitutes routine interaction is the most vexing part of this policy, to the extent that it is the one part that is not otherwise clearly required in law. And I can say for myself that I am very unsatisfied with the definition that's there, but I don't know of any other definition. These things are going to have to be worked through, and I would encourage and invite other ways to measure what constitutes routine interaction. There has been no guidance on this whatsoever by anyone. So, it's a laboratory in terms of defining, what is a reasonable definition of routine so that these various protections can be effective.
Thank you. We summarize 907 with visitors. 916. That was 916. 907 was type of visitors. Just the one question I had was that
if there are any particular changes.
Just one question for the administration, just more out of curiosity. Parent observations limited to 2 classroom observations per school year.
Are you moving on?
To 907, yes. I'm sorry.
I just want to make sure everybody was aware that.
Okay, I'm sorry. I thought I kind of melded that in together. Okay, so that was 916 with the volunteers. 907 is the school visitors one. The only question I had is more or less the parent observations. Do we have any statistics on that? How many parents come in and observe that the course of the year? Just out of curiosity, more or less.
I don't have hard data, but at the secondary level, from my experience over the 28 years I've been here, it's very few parents. But we always accommodate and make sure that the teacher is aware prior to the parent coming in. They sign in and they go through the process. It doesn't happen that often. I don't know, Mr. Cook, if you see it anymore. It's very rare. Elementary, I don't know if that's different. That might be different.
You may get a few more, but it's usually going to be the volunteers that are in there assisting with things that are sense.
And I'm going to assume, too, that 2, a minimum of, or a maximum of 2, is so that there's another disruption.
Yeah. Sort of just curious how it was kept records. I didn't have anything. I didn't have anything else with 907. Mr. Florence, if you have anything to say.
On the 907, I just asked for some instruction with regard to 916, and I'll suggest that that we consult with administration and any board members have any ideas to propose some other alternative measures of routine interaction.
Well, I think, in my opinion, the board can do some more thinking and research. We'll hear from Mr. Rinaldi, put it back on the agenda for committee next month, and have more discussion.
Okay. Well, and 907 too, when you look at 907, I mean, what were some of the major changes? I'm looking at one that has to deal with photography, recording of students and things like that. Now, we've talked about recordings and photography many times before about making sure that we have the proper clearances to take pictures, number 1. Number 2, though, when you have events and everything, sometimes you take pictures for the purpose of putting them in, the school newspaper or whatever, and you talk about a crossover here, you end up having sometimes the PTA people taking those types of pictures. Now we talk about providing in writing to the superintendent the following information of what you're going to do. It starts to raise, is that part of the changes that occurred here? And if we would have seen a strikeout version, we could tell the changes.
Yeah, this is pretty much a total rewrite. If you look at existing policy 907, it's maybe, I don't know,
like a page long.
It's very scant.
Yeah.
This is extremely, so a strikeout version wouldn't really apply here to this kind of a policy. But I would encourage you to look at the current 907.
So what pushed the change in this one, John?
I think this ties to policy 917, right? Or the
916. Yeah, it mentions that.
There's a mention of this in there.
It says it references 916 at the beginning.
I think most of the points in our current policy are in here. It's just a little bit more elaborate and more descriptive.
But what raised the question to redo this one? Or
This
who
is
raised
the
the question?
recommendation of the solicitor's office to do a revision to our current policy.
So she just out of the blue said we ought to probably look at this one.
Well, I don't know. It's probably in conjunction with the administration, seeing sort of the philosophy of the existing policy, which really didn't say very much. This is, not inconsistent with other districts' policies on the same thing. The one thing that I agree with you, Bob, that may be more confusing is perhaps, again, read literally, either restricted with regard to the use of photography and so forth for future school purposes.
Because if you're putting it in here, there's another policy that talks about this too that should be adjusted accordingly. And we should go back to the discussion on how do we get, do we get the permission that people, or do we, we had that whole long discussion about when we're sending it out that if you don't respond back, then that automatically means we have permission as compared to making sure that people are granting permission. And so that opens that whole door again that we ought to go back to, and that's in another policy at this point in time. So we should address that as well.
We're not talking about FERPA policy.
No, he's talking about the sending out a permission form and saying if you don't respond, then we're going to assume that it's a yes.
Passive
What?
consent.
Thank you, passive consent. I knew there was a term.
That's kind of reflected in the FERPA, with the FERPA policies are with regard to curriculum provision. It's a negative consent. Well, whatever the board wants to do, isn't that?
I mean, since we opened the can of worms, we should talk about it and go through it probably in more detail.
There is a section, I think, to answer one of Bob's questions on, which I was trying to find it, on page 5 of 6, under public meetings / performance exception. I think you were talking about people that come into school gyms and auditoriums. So there seems to be an exception for that kind of activity.
I mean, we've seen pictures in classrooms too taken already and everything. And so, by this, we're basically should be eliminating pictures in classrooms.
That's covered under our acceptable use policy for students.
That's what I'm saying. So these all tie together and should be linked together accordingly. Yes.
I didn't really see much of a concern with 907 stuff when I read through it. It seems very, very straightforward as far as that goes. It was, defining photography. It seems to account for everything else. I wasn't really. I had more questions with 916 than I did with 907. I didn't see a problem with 907. Unless someone else from the board or somebody else has.
Mr. Snyder, if I may?
Yeah.
Just ask a question. Bob, are you referring to more, like I'm looking at, on page 4, a portion of, under number 8, photography of students and their faculty and staff. I don't know if you're referring to this, but I can think about it. There's a party going on in a classroom, especially at elementary level. And somebody takes out a cell phone and we start to take pictures. Is that what you're referring to as maybe, I see this particular policy negating that from happening which may not be in the best interest of folks that attend that event. You know, as a mom or a dad, I want to take some pictures of an activity in class.
Yeah.
I'm asking, is that what you were
That's
referring
part of-
to as one of the issues that could be of concern?
Well, and you know what, that concern goes both ways as you look at it.
Sure.
Yes, the parents want to take it because their child are participating and everything. But the second part is you have to worry about if they're turning around and putting that up on Facebook and everything else, and that you don't have permission from the other students in the class. You know, you're taking pictures of A, B, and C never granted permission, which now comes back to the passive approval type thing again. And so that all plays into this.
Well, one thing that you said, I think I understood you to say one of your concerns was, what about the internal use of their yearbook and so forth? And I realize that none of this policy would apply to them. This only applies to visitors or outside third-party, non-school people.
Well, yes and no. Okay, when you say that, that's true of a photographer taking the pictures and everything for the yearbook or for any of the building books or anything else. But when you're having, let's say, PTA members in and they're assisting, go back to the party, go back to any kind of events that are in there, and they pull out their cell phone and start taking pictures, that's, you know, they're taking it hopefully to acknowledge the events or whatever, but how far are we going?
I think the board, that's something the board has to decide, but I think that both points are equally valid here. You know, you may not want your special education class.
Right.
You may not want your child's picture taken by somebody else, which will inevitably end up on a Facebook or something. So, I mean, if that's the case, if that's what the board's desire is, then I think the way it's written here is in a very restricted way. Serves that purpose.
Right, and I agree with you at that point. As I said, that's the whole reason I'm bringing it out, but it does link back to the other policy, then we can't do it in a passive mode. We have to do it in, you know, the opposite direction.
Well, what if we look at just public meetings performances exception? We already put in there sporting events, concerts, so come to the concert, everybody's taking pictures out there. I don't know if we can rework the language in there to say school-sponsored social events. I don't know, which could maybe include the harvest party or whatever kind of event that usually the elementary schools would have some sort of. It's usually have a lot of social things for a lot of the holidays through the year, and parents will come in and obviously take pictures. And the kids will obviously they'll take a picture of their child, somebody who might be a good friend or just be their new friend. They don't know, but again, I see the point. I don't know if that can be should that be phrased that way? Can we put that exception in for classroom social events? I don't know if that's a term, but that's what that is because it's similar. You volunteer at the party and you want to take some pictures, just like you see your child in concert or the football game or the basketball game. You want to take pictures, and you're going to get other people in the photograph. It happens. So we have that exception in there. I don't know if that's opening up a can of worms.
Did you say non-public event?
I mean, the other thing that you see sometimes...
They already have open to the public in here, meaning that's covering the concerts and sporting events. Yeah.
Prohibited part.
You couldn't really restrict that.
No, yeah, public you can't.
What about something to the effect that nothing in this policy shall protect, shall prohibit a parent to take photographs of their child?
An incidental, whatever the term is for incidental photography, somebody in the background. What about with can we just make it so that, I don't know, parents can go with the teacher can't have that? Phrase it that way. The parents can take pictures of their child's Halloween party, but the teachers can't take pictures of them. Well, teachers can't take pictures of the students. But I've seen, I've been to spring dances. I've seen the elementary schools, spring fling. They get out their iPhone and take pictures of their. She showed it to me. She showed my son dancing at the spring fling. She showed it to me. He was doing a good job. He gets attention when he dances. So, but she had everything. I have no objection to it. It's fun, public. Yeah, and that was the spring fling, which is that's not really.
We just have to restrict it,
that's
the picture can only include the parent's child,
or the main subject should be the parent's child. The intent
would be to take the child with his or her friends, but just focus the intent has to be the child. You know, this is the whole thing. Everybody has a video camera in their pockets. And this is an issue.
Well, I think
they're not going to give them up. So
the other thing that you do at events, you put a sign up that says, recognize if you're participating or you're at this event, that you may be
photographed.
That's correct.
Yeah,
And that's how you do that. And even if you have to put that in a classroom when you have an event, so be it, because then you should know if a student's in there that says no photographs, you have to make other arrangements for it. And that's why you have to go back to that other policy and change the way that reads. But that way you then make, and I've lived through that, where there are students that end up having to get pulled out and put into another classroom during certain events, so they do miss getting photographed or whatever.
So if an elementary school kid, if an elementary school class is having a party,
yeah,
and the parents don't want their child to be photographed,
correct,
the child misses the party.
Correct. Unless there's no pictures going with.
Use don't photograph.
It's one of two ways. I've seen it where they pull the children out, put them against other activities or
In Easton or Wilson?
It has been in Wilson because they actually have the policy where you must give permission. Because there was questions because of some things that went on with divorced families and everything else. And that's where you run into the issues.
Yeah, you can't do that. You can't let the kid.
That's why you threw me off here and said we pulled him out, but that's Wilson. Okay.
Yeah, we can't pull it.
That is correct. But you know, you have to honor the wishes of the parents.
Yeah.
For a parent,
request should be honored. Yes, I agree. Any other comments? 907. I say we still reevaluate this and look at that, see how they link together. I don't know if there's a way we can.
I'd love to offer some wisdom, but I'm everyone. I really am. If we're taking public social institutions and imposing rules that are neither public nor social on them, and there's just very little that I could offer to make these policies easier to implement.
Yeah, it is hard.
I wish I could help more. And I tell you the truth, I can't turn to colleagues because we're on the same boat, essentially. We're all adopting these policies right now to conform with the new restrictions and the new laws. So,
I mean, have we ever had any complaints?
Yeah.
You know, I don't know.
I just remember one a student wasn't allowed for some reason. We just didn't have them photographed. That's all. But they participated. It really wasn't an issue.
Well, this is what happens sometimes. Again, this is maybe extreme, but in the age of the immediate publication of anything, any picture that gets taken, we've seen cases where kids have then manipulated the photographs of other kids for purposes that I guess could be described as bullying.
Yeah.
I mean, that's the real issue here. I mean, this has really only been a problem in the last handful of years with social media.
Yeah.
Because, the pictures are taken and they're instantly, sometimes automatically,
they go viral very quickly.
Yeah. So
they can end up on anywhere.
So, it's no longer, you take your pictures to the drugstore and get your use after. And then they can use them to look at them.
Are you going to, Mr. Snow, are you planning on keeping 907 and 916 back for next month?
Yes.
For further discussion?
Yes, we'll keep those for further discussion. I think we can move it on. They're all made some good points to think about and evaluate it. So, okay, that was 916 and 917, and item C, Mr. Reinhardt has the organization chart to share with us.
I just wanted to offer this as a reflective document, as a reflection of the recent administrative changes that the board supported. So I've talked to several board members about the requirement that we seem to have to run this through the policy committee when changes are made. I'm not so sure that that is something that we need to do. I'll offer that up as a question.
My feeling on this all along has been there are certain things in some of the board policies and everything that should be changed. This is one. Typically, an organizational chart is something that you should be required to do to change your organization so they understand reporting structures, but it necessarily isn't a policy issue. You typically don't find it as part of the policy, and I think it's one of the policies we should be abolishing.
I agree.
Yeah.
So that's the only action I see going forward.
Yes.
As I said, don't get me wrong. I think we still need the chart. But
The charts are important, no question. But you know, I agree with Mr. Reno on that. This is one we might be able to eliminate. Do you have any questions? Any board members on that? Any questions there
On the chart?
On the chart itself?
No.
Okay. That's all.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Okay. Yes, I'm sorry.
I have one item I'd like to add there. It was not on the agenda, if I may or may not.
Policy item?
Yes, sir.
Do we want to add it without the public having a chance to review it?
That's fine.
I don't think we should add it.
Okay, we'll get it out there for next month. That's fine. Thank you.
Okay, and then item D, do we have any comments from the public regarding policy agenda items 907, 916? Or possibly the organizational chart, I guess. So, anyone from the public have comment, please step up and identify yourself and be heard.
I want to talk about this post chart.
Really?
Yeah.
My name is Sarah Gilligan. I'm Street in Easton. I'm, as you know, the president of the Easton Area Council PTA. I have to warn you, I have time for my remarks, and they're more than 5 minutes, so I'm just going to do it. I don't see the timer right now. So.
She's putting it up now.
Okay, so I'm going to talk. Before you even get the timer up, I'm going to go.
Get up.
In my capacity as Council PTA President, I want to point out some serious concerns with the proposed policy on volunteers. Ultimately, we think this policy should be tabled for the time being, and it has been. We all need time to work out some significant problems. I talked at length today with Mr. Freund, and I believe that we share many of the same concerns about the clearances for visitors to schools. As we see it, the policy has 4 problems. It stems from a state law that is too broad in its scope. It's being rushed too quickly. It's onerous, both in additional requirements it places on PTAs and on building principals, and in the cost of acquiring clearances. Now, a lot of this has come up, but I want to say it again because I want you to hear a cohesive argument from the PTA. So even if we've gone through pieces of this, I want to see them again. The 4th is that it plays to people's fears, treating ordinary people as potential criminals. I'll address each of these. So the first, the state law itself is broad. This policy comes on the tails of the enactment of Pennsylvania Act 153, a state bill which expanded Child Protective Services Act to school employees. We know that this bill was not intended to apply specifically to PTAs. In fact, the main sponsor of the bill has said that it was only intended to apply to individuals who have one-on-one contact with children. Representative Dan Newell of Adams County was quoted in his hometown newspaper as saying that only, quote, those in supervisory positions that could be left alone to work one-on-one with children must get these clearances. PTA members rarely are left to work individually with children. It's just not the nature of the kind of volunteer work that we do. I also reached out in January to our state representative, Bob Freeman, for clarification about Act 153. His office contacted their liaison at the Department of Human Services and was told simply, Act wasn't intended to apply to PTAs. In the months since then, legislators in Harrisburg have been working on a mandatory language relating to Act 153. They had hoped to pass something in May before budget season, but it hasn't happened yet. Representative Freeman has requested that the committee working on this new language include PTAs in its discussion. At the heart of the matter, we believe, is what is meant by volunteer. Act 153, like its predecessors, defines a volunteer as an adult applying for an unpaid position as a volunteer responsible for the welfare of a child or having direct contact with children. PTA members do not apply for unpaid positions. They do a lot of things, but they don't hold specific, routine, unpaid positions in schools. Now, the current proposed policy addresses that wording. It clearly both dispenses with the language of unpaid positions and requires a procedure by which PTA members will have to apply to become volunteers in schools. So it corrects some of the ambiguity of the language of Act 153, but it leaves open just as many or more questions. It defines volunteer in such a way that nearly all, or nearly none, of the PTA members would be subject to the same clearances required by the Pennsylvania Act 153. It doesn't provide clear guidance on who needs clearances. Mr. Ford gave examples of overnight chaperones or tutors as volunteers who need to seek approved volunteer status. An easy case for visitor status would be a parent bringing cupcakes to a party. This was another example he gave me earlier today. But there's a lot of gray area in between those, and the policy itself doesn't provide any guidance on that in between area. And that's what we need. The 5 events, this is something that you've talked about. Some of our active volunteers have multiple children at multiple schools, or at the same month, but they require different days to go. I have to say, I'm a little bit confused in hearing you talk about the 5 events or whatever number of events it might be, because it seemed to me that the examples that kept coming up were small ones, like volunteering at book fair, going to volunteer at Harvest Festival, volunteering in some position, but that somehow if we stack up enough of those, that suddenly we have routine engagement, even though individually those would be visitor status, right? They would be things that people come in as visitors. So are we now saying that there's some kind of a link between visitors? So if you're a visitor often enough in a school, then you need approved status? That seems strange to me. It certainly needs to be worked out. So we don't think the policy is ready. I think it needs much more work. And we are willing to meet to talk about that. That addresses my concerns about it being hasty to roll out the policy now. We have had several discussions with administrators about this, but we learned about policy 916 yesterday when it was posted online. So we clearly didn't have a chance to give any real meaningful input. And we think that as a group that would have a whole lot of impact, a whole lot to say about it, and really be potentially really positively hit by this, we should be involved in those conversations. So let's spend more time working together. The third reason that we were worried about the policy, may I?
I'll give you another minute, yes, sir.
Oh, no, I might need to, but that's okay. Okay, is that we are worried about it being too onerous. I've touched on a few of these. The PTA faces huge challenges in rounding up enough volunteers to carry out events. We often recruit members by encouraging them to attend a single event and then convincing them to sign up for more. And we think that requiring great numbers of potential volunteers to apply to the school to become volunteers and to pay for clearances is going to discourage people from getting involved at the levels that we need to sustain our current work in schools. As an example, let me tell you that Taxanosa has had trouble recruiting officers in the past year. We don't have anybody who signed on to be an officer next year. Additional requirements for parents makes it even less likely that Taxanosa can even have a PTA. That's a lot of work that will not happen in those schools. Cost of clearances may not appear to be much for those who live comfortably, but they are prohibitive to our lower earning families. And we, as a PTA, have discussed ways of diversifying the ranks. It's important for parents of all economic strata to be allowed to be in the schools, working with their children. We fear that those parents will be shut out. We would not favor paying upfront for such. This is one of the examples, right? We think that we would face just as many of the kind of hazards that you would want to also not front. People who might take a clearance and then flee somewhere else. We also think that there are parents who do multiple things like PTAs and booster clubs, and it seems impossible to know whether the PTA should fund that particular clearance, and then that parent uses it for something else. So that's seriously a problem. We believe the policy places unwelcome burden on building principals who will have extra work thrust upon them to maintain a team of volunteers that has worked up until now seamlessly within schools. Questions are whose responsibility to keep track of clearances? Who will be responsible for ensuring the right volunteers? If an arbitrary cutoff of 5 schools, who keeps track of that? Who keeps track as parents move? What about PTA functions off campus? Loads of questions here. Finally, we question the need for such a policy. We want all of our children safe in schools. That is not a question. Nobody is doubting that. But we also need to resist the temptation to see everything as a danger, everyone as a potential criminal. Act 153 was a reaction to a horrible event. But that doesn't mean that we need to panic and impose unnecessary costs and burdens on good people. There are costs that come with even well-meaning policies. We believe that the cost of both Act 153 and the policies 916 and 907 taken together could involve a reduced, less diverse, less sustainable team of volunteers in the schools. PTAs do important work in schools, and a reduction in our volunteer base will harm those schools. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Do you have any other comments from the public regarding the policies at hand? For the regarding the policies at hand, please.
Mr. Snyder, the gentleman who's walking to the podium, I agree with much of what Dr. Gilligan said. But the one thing we have to remember is whether or not we implement this policy, the fact that it is, this has been a law since the 70s.
Yeah, I know.
So we're obligated to follow what the law is. This is a firm statutory law that requires these things. It includes volunteers. And we have to figure out is a reasonable way to interpret the law. So notwithstanding her very righteous and well-reasoned reasons why this is a bad idea. We still have to deal with it because it is in fact has in fact been in effect since December of last year. So we can't just ignore it.
No, I don't think we will. I think there are enough people looking into it.
I'm John Kennedy from Easton. It does seem that you have in your hands the power to trash the PTA if you choose to do so, and do it in the name of the law. I was curious, and I don't need an answer now, but I hope at some point it will be clear if people do require screening to continue their volunteer work, exactly what that will be, what's required, where you go. I'm curious about who the gatekeepers are on the screening process, and I wonder who's in charge of setting all that up. The problem, it seems to me, that you face is the law was written, I have to assume with good intent, to address a problem that someone saw. It seems to me it's, as many lawmakers kind of realize, not very well written and is unlikely to address the intent, unlikely to protect children. The type of thing, when you try to set screening, the people you most want, you end up screening out ordinary people, and the people you most want to screen out are the ones who make the effort to get through the process. And so you don't really succeed in making anyone safer. I hope, well, I know you will, that you will, and it's going to be a lot of work for you to small line, but I know you will make your very best effort to take this law and make some adjustments that will actually have some positive effect rather than all negative. And I hope that everybody will work together on that and try to get that done. Thanks.
Thank you, Mr. Kennedy.
Thank you.
But what if we would interpret this law in the most liberal way that we could, make it inclusive? What would be the consequence?
Well, a couple consequences. One would be, and the most likely would be an audit citation, which would require us to make corrections. The second, and Mr. Reinhardt's not going to like this, but if there would be a deliberate ignoral of the law, his commission would be sanctioned. The third possibility is if there would be an event of abuse that would fall within the parameters of the law that we ignored, that would be evidence of deliberate indifference on our part and subject to school enhanced liability. Those are three things I think I'd rather have.
Enhanced, because if there is an incident, regardless of what the policy is, it would be.
They're going to be liable.
Right, but I mean, if a volunteer abused a child, ordinarily there might be some difficulty showing that the school had the requisite knowledge or acted with deliberate indifference. But if we deliberately said, well, you know what, we don't like this, we're not going to apply this to volunteers, that would be clear evidence that we were aware that this was an obligation of ours and deliberately ignored it, and as a result, the rights to bodily integrity of a child were violated. So I don't think it's a good idea to admit it. But yes, I mean, you do have to find some kind of a reasonable interpretation. That's why I say that, there's no way that you can possibly anticipate every situation that comes down, and hopefully, the administrators will look at this reasonably with regard to what the intended purpose of these changes in the child welfare law were, and try to balance them as best they can. And hopefully, I agree with Dr. Gilpin. I hope that somebody comes to fix this, as long as they don't make it worse, because it's pretty screwed up. And believe me, this isn't the only law that's screwed up. And I mentioned to you that in the last 6 months there have been 21 new laws or amendments to existing laws that have gone into effect that pertain to the welfare of children. In Pennsylvania. There's 21 new laws, all of which now have to be understood in terms of new obligations, new liabilities, new reporting. Perhaps the most onerous of those is the Professional Standards and Practices Liability Law, or Professional Standards and Practices Commission Law, that it has a very, very low threshold of reporting for any kind of misconduct.
Thank you. Do we have any other public comment on? Yes, please, come on up.
Good evening. My name is Chrissy Mattis, and I am a school district parent of 4. And I just wanted to give you a tiny perspective or feeling of what a parent's thinking when they hear about all of this. A little bit of history. I worked for the district for about 7.5 years as a school nurse, and I've been part of the PTA programs. I'm now going on into my 11th year as PTA, and I'll be here for another 10 years. I have 2 kids at the elementary level, 1 at the middle school level, and 1 at the high school level. So I've been able to experience what is happening over the course of the years with volunteerism, and it's definitely going down and not in a good direction. Years back when I first was at Tracy Elementary, it was booming, 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 and it's still great, but the numbers are definitely going down, and I feel like this policy and the definition, depending on how we define that volunteer position or role, is really going to hinder the programs of the PTA and what we bring into the school. Talking to people that do have the money and the capability to pay for the clearances, it's not going to matter. It's not going to matter whether they can pay or not. It's the principle of it. So I just kind of want to point that out. And just to give an example, just in the past 2 weeks, the opportunities I've had to go in to volunteer in the school district, number 1, post-prom up at Easton Area High School, which struggled significantly to get volunteers, and that's an overnight event, so then we're going to be requiring all of those folks to get clearances to stay overnight with those kids. I don't see a great future for the post-prom if that's something that comes into play, especially the fact that our PTA numbers are extremely low. And I mean, I don't even make it to a lot of the PTA meetings at the high school because I'm invested more in my younger kids at this moment. But I know because I'm on those emails, I get everything, and we just don't have the parents there to help. Second, there's a food festival going on tomorrow at Tracy Elementary School. Parents bringing in food, variety of Pennsylvania Dutch food. So they're going to ask everyone to get clearances to sit there. I mean, this is where you have to, say what is a volunteer, what is not. The walkathon at Easton Area Middle School, they had a spring formal, and the Dorney Park Day are in need of volunteers. That's another one if you're outside of the school building, serving and chaperoning students. And Tracy Tiger Day. So those are just the things that are within 2 weeks of my own personal schedule. Personally, having a clearance is not a problem for me, but I'm looking at it at other perspectives from other people and the parents that I've spoken with regarding this. I was approached personally by people from Paxinosa, and there's strong concern. They may not have, a PTA because there's absolutely no one to step up to lead that school. So what do we do? And what's going to happen with those kids' programs? And I just feel like we just have to think of all those things, not just all the way at the top level and the policy, but think of what's happening down at the schools and to the kids and how that's going to directly affect them, programs that are happening, and the help that we provide to the teachers on a regular basis. So that's kind of my pitch. I have lots of notes, but I'm not going to go into detail. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Do we have any other comments from the public? Please.
Hi, good evening. My name is Jonathan Askiak, and I'm a parent of Marsh Elementary. And with regards to what the comments were about volunteers, I'm also a licensed social worker. Me and my wife, we do the best we can to come to your events. We each work 2-3 jobs, and paying $40, $50 to come volunteer at a parent dance or things like that would be a burden, even to a middle-income family. The other part is there's a lot of undocumented immigrant families who do not have access to a background check because they lack a social security number, and I know those families are very involved as best they can, even though there's language barriers and things of that nature. If your numbers are really low, this would alienate a significant amount of the population. We're talking about low-income, free and reduced lunch that are eligible for school services. Now you're not working with the parents, and you're alienating more of the community as well. With regards to the alarmist approach that I've heard during these discussions, yes, there are individuals who are sex offenders, and there are also well-rounded individuals who have committed crimes even after a background check. And it seems like these policies that have been put into effect have not really remediated the situation. So I guess my comment would be to defer, some of these determination of who can and cannot get background checked to either the principals or the teachers, the individuals who do work with the families. So I don't know if that's something that could be brought up in further discussions. Put it at the school level, at the individual level, and determine who's there often, who's there every week, who's there once a year. That's it. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any other comments from the public regarding said policy items? Okay. That being said, just a brief summary. We're keeping policies. We're still reworking policies 907 with regard to visitors and policy 916 regarding volunteers. A lot of discussion, a lot of questions on that. So hopefully there'll be a lot of input from the board on work by the solicitor to kind of appease everybody, which is going to be unlikely, unfortunately. But we also had Mr. Reinhardt with the organizational chart. And that's it for policy.
Thank you, Mr. Snyder. Number 4, buildings and grounds. We're going to start with library future facilities use. And our presenter will be Mr. Reinhardt.
All right, thank you, Mr. President. We have, as promised, come back tonight with some more information regarding our suggested moves and our ideas regarding the future of the school district. And we'll wrap this additional information, if you will, around some key questions. For example, in general, one of the questions that has been asked, when did we organize our grades into the current arrangement, and why did we do so? Well, the answer to that question is that the current alignment reaches back to 1999, and it was based on the move of our 9th grade program to the high school. And at that time, there were only 6 elementary schools. So I also think it's safe to say that we were facing some space issues, that we had lots of kids, and there was a desire to do this in an effort to try to accommodate more students. We've also been asked about by board members and also people in the public about why we did not choose to move the 9th grade back to the back into the middle school. And the advent of standards-based education and the Pennsylvania core standards have aligned instruction in the Commonwealth to grades 3 to 5, 6 to 8, and then 9 through 12. And we don't believe that placing our 9th graders back into the middle school is going to be an instructional, a positive in terms of instruction for them. Would also decrease the number of opportunities that those students have instructionally, because they would not have access to a lot of the courses, both elective courses and also remedial courses that they might need to take at that level. And the whole issue of extracurriculars would have to be looked at, because we'd have 9th grade at a population of 9th graders at a site where the extracurriculars would not be held for the most part. We rejected the PEL recommendation for the repurposing of Tracy School for a number of important reasons. And this is another question that has come up since we first talked about this. When we asked the PEL to give us a look at the district and to offer their thoughts, there were two reasons for that. Number one was to gain a lot of knowledge and current information about who we are and what we look like and how we can utilize our space and where our space is located. The other was to ask them if they could, putting that information together, could they process a direction that we might want to take? And so they did both. So the notion that the PEL experience yielded simply a recommendation is not really accurate, because that report gave us volumes of information about our schools, the condition of our schools, our communities, the potential for increased population and increased economic activity. There are lots of information inside the PEL report that can be utilized no matter what we choose to do. And it's information that would have taken lots and lots of man hours for the administration and the board to pull all that together. But the other piece of it was their suggestion to repurpose Tracy School. And at the time, if you recall, we hadn't really talked very much about the district's interest, and I say district, I'm talking about administration, board, and a community, if you will, the district's interest in opening up the door to early childhood educational opportunities. And so one of the things that impacted on our acceptance, if you will, or our not our acceptance, but our view of the PEL recommendation about Tracy was, well, what does that do to our efforts to want to expand early childhood education opportunities? We also, at that time, were just embarking on community schools as a philosophy. We've seen the very important and positive impact that the community school philosophy can have in not just the school, but also the community. Lots of wonderful things are happening in and around Paxenosa School. And we now know that we can look forward to that experience at Cheston. And so that has been an influencing factor on whether or not we want to further skew the idea of community schools in our school district. And after a long conversation about that, we don't want to do that. We believe that there's power in community schools, and there will be more power in community schools in the future as our communities change and evolve in both positive and negative ways. So we wanted to re-examine the PEL recommendation about Tracy with that community school lens. Very truthfully, investing what we believe to be $6 to $8 million in Tracy School to benefit the 100 students or so who attend the academy didn't seem to be a wise investment for us. Now, the question about whether it would benefit the administrative structure of the district is questionable. We I think, do a fine job in this facility. It's beautiful. We could gain a yield from selling this building, and I think that's something that we need to keep on the table as an option. But to invest money into Tracy, eliminate it as a school for X number of students altogether, and then put a population of 100 in there at a cost of $6 to $8 million just didn't seem wise. So all of that considered is the reason we decided to take a look at the idea of moving grade 5 back to the elementary schools. We believe that's a positive move for the district because it aligns us once again with the way that the Commonwealth has been aligning the curriculum in this massive effort to try to standardize our programs across the Commonwealth. The question is, when would we expect to do that? I would think that we should target 2016-17 for that 5th grade move. That schools in August, if you will, of 16-17 would find 5th grade back in the Easton elementary buildings. A lot of people have asked about reapportioning our student attendance areas, and we've been taking a look at that, and the answer to that is yes. It is our belief that most of our student attendance areas would have to be reapportioned in some way to accommodate all those classes. Initially, we thought we might not have to do much of that, and maybe we could focus that on several school communities, and modifying that. But it's going to require us to realign some of our attendance areas, almost all of them for elementary children. Our hope is that by the beginning of the second semester of next year, which would be in January, parents would know where their children will be assigned for the following August start of the school year. That is what our goal would be. We have a reason for wanting to move this as quickly as possible because when you take a look at the bigger and broader issues that are facing our facilities and the use of our facilities in the next 5 years, we really shouldn't sit back and not move, because there's going to be some economy realized through all of these changes that we're going to take a look at, and we're going to ask the board to study. What are the costs associated with moving children back? We have not been able to determine those costs yet. We're certainly about to undertake that study, but we do not see that as a major financial change for the school district. We believe we can move 5th grade classes back with certainly a lot less financial commitment of new money than some of our other alternatives, and that is also one of the reasons why the central administration has looked at this very seriously. Now, the issue of the Easton Area Academy, we see this as a very positive move to take that program and house it in our middle school. And the reason for that move, the positive nature for the reasons, are the reasons that I'm going to mention. First of all, the building that program is in was not ever designed for a public school, or any kind of school for that matter. And while it functions well, it is not the best environment for students. If we can house the Easton Area Academy program in one of our buildings, in all fairness to everyone, I believe we have a responsibility to do that. We believe that we can house the Easton Area Academy building within our middle school in such a way that it will be able to that it will enhance the instruction given to those students now attending, approximately 100 students now attending that program. It will provide us with an economy that the move will allow us to sell that property, and that yield will then be utilized, I would hope, in abating the costs of some of the other changes that we're going to make. I'll be very honest with you, there is no question that the population of students that are housed in an academy anywhere in an alternative school, those populations of students have few advocates. So my point is that I don't think we'll ever find a group of parents or a group of advocates to come here in the future and argue that the facility at the academy is in need of paint and need of other kinds of things. But if that program and those students are housed in our buildings, there is an advocacy built into that. Building administrators, staff members, and so forth will have stronger and better ways to advocate for the facilities being used by that population of students. Mrs. Millie, if you could show that one floor plan. I'd like to this time show how that academy will fit into the physical building that we have. And we have it illustrated here. Somebody's going to need to hold that up, perhaps. Bob, can you do that?
So the way the middle school is laid out, it's also projected.
Oh, yes, good.
But if you can go to the first floor plan right
there.
There you go. So the way the middle school is laid out, there is a first floor where the basement or the first floor level is a set of classrooms that does not have any access to the second, third, or fourth floors. So we would be recommending that the academy would be housed in that location within the middle school on that first floor. It would merely operate as an independent school with a separate entrance. The students would be located on the first floor. The students at the Eastern Area Middle School complex would be on the second, third, and fourth floors. And all areas that have access to the rest of the building would have swipe access on them so that only staff members can egress through both sides. So that would prevent students from the middle school coming to the first floor or students from the academy going up to the second, third, or fourth floors. They would operate as two separate buildings on one campus. This is very like other programs across the state. I have spoken to other directors of alternative education throughout the state. I can name a few of them, such as Pocono Mountain, where their program is housed in a middle school as well, and they have a very similar structure.
Yeah, and that's been a concern expressed by some parents. It's been a concern expressed by those of us who are involved in running the schools. You know, just how does this physical plan, how will this accommodate an isolated program like the academy? And it does, as you can see, very nicely. The transference of the program into those rooms. Now, one of the things you need to note up here. These are the modulars, correct?
Yep.
All right. So the modulars will be gone, and that will be the front door. What's left there is the front door and the access to the academy. So that group of modulars will be dismantled. So I hope that you can see that there is a perfect blending here of the physical building with the program that we want to offer. And we would be, I think we would be remiss in not looking at this and taking a long, serious look at trying to accommodate that program in that building.
I can say that the classrooms that are located on that first floor, there is the identical number of spaces on that first floor that are needed in order to operate Eastern Area Academy.
Right.
So we have taken the steps to look at that and ensure that that space will be adequate, and it is perfectly adequate.
Students will arrive at that door. They will not arrive at the middle school door. Again, that was another question, I know, a concern that I've heard uttered by some parents. So I think you'll see by that illustration that there's a nice blend there. The costs associated with moving the academy to the middle school, once again, I'm taking a look at this and generalizing because we don't have specifics, but we expect to have those specific costs very soon. But as you can see, moving a program of a limited program over to the building is not going to be a big expense. The accommodations that we're going to need inside that building, we believe our folks can do that very well. With this, at least oversee some of those, the security pieces of this, the partitioning of some of those classrooms into offices. We believe our folks can handle that very well, and they've accommodated this building for the central office. You can see it's beautifully done. Now, underneath the academy, is the technology program to the side.
Underneath.
Above it. Excuse me. Above it is the.
He hasn't been in there yet.
Yeah. Oh, yes, I was. Yes, I was. I sort of thought we went downstairs.
Yeah. Proposed to be above.
Oh, all right. There you see. The technology program is over here. Currently housed over here. What we're talking about would be the servers and all of the equipment that's needed to run a technology program. That would need to be moved from the academy building to the middle school. But there is room in the middle school for those programs, those services as well. And we want to show them, Mike, where we. Okay. We're going to utilize now. This is the next floor, and we're going to utilize those classrooms there to house the technology. So they're going to go. The technology will go from the bottom to the top, so to speak. There.
Second floor of the modulars.
They'll be gone. Yep. And everything will be housed in there. Once again, the cost will be in moving the equipment and obviously the wiring and the whatever has to happen. The accommodations in those classrooms should be minimal because we're just transferring from one spot to another. Okay. Let's see. Move further to the. Some people have asked us about the warehouse. We do have a warehouse operation there. We are going to move away from warehousing materials, and we're going to actively pursue the notion of keeping materials housed in buildings as needed. Is that correct, Mr. Simonelli?
Yeah, there'll be some areas for some of the bulk loaders. We have a completely open floor downstairs in this building.
Yes.
So those things that our individual buildings can't handle on the bulk matters can be put downstairs.
That brings me to the question regarding the future use of modular classroom units at both Paxnosa and the middle school. Those units, as I mentioned, were purchased in 1999. They're 15 years old. The exterior of the buildings, those units appear to be in good shape. The interior floor surfaces require attention. This is at Paxnosa, by the way. Attention as the tiles are starting to need to be replaced. But in general, these units need to remain in place and in use until the interior renovation at Paxnosa has been completed. So the modular units that are at Paxnosa should remain in place as we continue, and we're going to talk about this at some point in the very near future here, as we continue to look at the needs to modify the interior of Paxnosa for an elementary education program. The units at the middle school were also purchased in 1999, but we do not need them. And we believe we can tear them down, and we've talked about the reuse of those. But since they are stacked one on top of the other, and built that way, we do not believe that when we get into pulling them apart, they're going to be reusable. And so our estimation, we're estimating now that the wisest thing for us to do would be to tear them down and just get rid of the material. In some cases, you can reuse those modular units, and districts often sell units to each other. But in this case, because they're stacked as they are, built the way they were, that would be very difficult for us to do. So when we thought we would get some income by selling them, I'm not sure that we will get income. What I've just talked about, we're going to distribute to you, so you have those these answers to these questions in your hand. I'd also like to distribute at this time the timeline for our facilities. We've worked at this, and Allie will bring these around to you, and also we have copies for people here attending the meeting. The timeline is one that is of great significance here, because quite frankly, if the board agrees with us, and approves of the idea of the realignment of 5th grade and moving the academy, we really must begin this process in order to meet a September. See, that's my age show. School always starts in September. In August of 2016, if we want to meet that deadline, we really must get this rolling. Part of that is that we would like to have parents and students know ahead of time, well in advance, where their new school might be if they are in the population that students are being moved. So, because there's a lot of sentiment attached to leaving a school and going to another one, and so it would be great to know that well in advance of the move. So the general discussion portions are here. Timelines for the facilities. The current year, you can see that the recommendations, or if you will, the suggestions being passed to the board by the administration. We need to authorize, if you will, our suggestion is to authorize Dewey Engineering to determine the scope of work at Paxinosa to bring that to the board by May, the end of this month rather, and then we also need to petition the Pennsylvania Department of Ed to let them know that we intend to modify the use of the middle school and the housing of students at the middle school. We're going from 2 separate middles to 1 middle, so that's a change in our organization, and so even if it's just 1 year, I have to get the PDE to approve that. You can see that the 15-16 year, we need to get the Paxinosa renovations taken care of. We need to disassemble the modular units. We need to look at and begin the relocation of the technology department, or at least plan for that. And you can see down by June of 2015, we're looking that summer of moving grade 5 back to the elementary schools, so they're ready to go for August of 2016. It's rather ambitious, but I think we can do it.
I have a couple of questions or comments.
Yep.
First, we heard a lot of talk about the academy, and we showed how the academy is going to be moved, where the doors are going to be, and all this emphasis on the academy, like we're dealing with animals, and everybody's scared to have the animals around their kids. And it's just totally ridiculous, although I know that there was a need for the administration to do that because of some community members. I think it's important to let the public know that, the kids in our academy aren't these crazy animal kids. They're kids that needed, a little more than what we all could offer them in the regular buildings. And, a lot of the kids are having trouble at home or this or that, and we're addressing that in the school, and the teachers and the staff we have take more of a parental role on top of just being an educator. So we're doing all this stuff because there's a concern from some parents I don't want my kids around those kids. Those kids aren't really any different than your kids. They have little issues here and there, and we're dealing with that, but I know a bunch of kids who graduated out of the academy and went on to college. A bunch of kids who went on to the workforce that I still keep in contact with, and they're doing great. So it's just a way for us to, you know, help kids. And I'm almost positive the majority of the people who have something bad to say about the academy never stepped foot in the academy, or don't know any kids that go there. So I just wanted to make that clear. I think it's a good idea to move 5th grade back to the elementary school. It was like that when I was in school, in elementary school just a couple of years ago. And, you know, it gives the child another year to mature, another year to get certain things that they wouldn't get when they move up. So I don't know why that was changed years ago, but I'm glad that we're considering putting that back. As far as, I know we need to move fast on this. I personally have no problem with asking Dewey to come back with numbers. But I think we need to have another discussion publicly now that the papers will put this out there, parents or the community will hear about it, and I'm sure we'll get more people at the next meeting to hear more from the public. But I think a major component is cost. And, you know, we spoke about that before, and we don't have that. And I think some people might have a decision today, and when they see the numbers come in, their decision might change. So I think we do need to have Dewey, you know, put the numbers together so we could put that out to the public as well. Regarding Paxinosa, you know, I've been on the board, it's going to be 4 years in December. And money was earmarked to get a boatload of work done at Paxinosa 6 or 7 years ago. And I believe if Paxinosa was located maybe in Palmer Fork 6, 7 years ago, they would have got finished. However, it's on 12th Street. Nobody cared back then. We need to get that taken care of. The money's there. We did phase 1. Those kids deserve to have the type of school that every other kid has. So I'd like to see us move on that as soon as possible. That's all I really have, but I do agree with allowing Dewey, if Dewey can in fact get the numbers by the next board meeting, which is about 2 weeks.
Yes.
I mean, if that is able to be done. But I think we need to hear that and then have more discussion, you know, and also now that the community is hearing about this, see who comes and what we hear from them at the next meeting. But I personally am in favor of it. Also, with the academy, I would recommend that we do a private sale, handled by our solicitor's office as we did with the 811 building. I want to make sure that that building doesn't go into the hands of a charter school, you know, which potentially it's designed for. So I'd like to do a private sale that our solicitors handle, that we make sure we agree with who is going to purchase the building. And last question was from Mike, or the only question. Mike, can you tell us, by just emptying out the academy of the technology of the students, what are we saving approximately a year? Just by keeping the heat just barely so we don't freeze pipes, the electricity and things?
I think that number was around 45,000, 45,000 a year.
And it's not going to cost any more when we move the students over to the middle school because we've been heating that.
Right. Correct. Yep.
John, I do have some concerns. I think we need the work done, and I think there's work that has to be done on a lot of buildings. Frank, I disagree with your comment because we've also let Palmer go into disrepair where we know we needed stuff. And the other one's Cheston where we really haven't done anything either. Talked about a lot. But what I start to wonder, John, is I don't know that all this work is Dewey. I mean, you may use Dewey to get a general estimate or whatever, and that should be it. But I think there's a place that plays where it's an architect that looks at it because you run into accountability and checks and balances. We have no check and balance system if Dewey does everything. For a general purpose of looking at things, there's other items that an architect brings to the table. I mean, you've worked with architects in the past too, and you see what they bring. I think Dewey is very important to the project and everything. I think as a check and balance, What I've seen with them and the different firms and some of the firms they've worked with, when they do their work, you don't end up having lawsuits or anything else. You have a good quality, because I've watched where Dewey can put out an idea, an architect puts out an idea, and they work to a better solution, and sometimes a less costly solution, which has really paid for their services that they provide. The other thing to be careful of, and this is what happens when you rush, as you know, is a lot of change orders. And I think, we have to be considerate of that as we go down the road. The other piece from Mike may be that we have to talk to bond counsel and see what other kind of funding or what may be happening with some of our bonds when they're coming due, and how things can be blended together to provide some of the funds that may be needed for some of this work. Because compared to when the money was borrowed for those projects at Paxnos and everything, and what the costs were back then and to what the costs are today, there is a big difference. Again, I think we have to start to look at some of this and decide what is an architect, and maybe a further discussion there with Dewey, with a REAP and everything, understanding that and seeing what really falls and what we believe falls into their line, their sweet spot, and then where else we have to do both a combination of an architect and a Dewey organization to make sure that we have a really good project plan and everything laid out.
But I agree with you 100%. When we speak up to their project oversight, right? I don't disagree at all. However, what I was thinking is, Dewey has everything on all of our buildings.
Well, they actually had provided numbers previously to us.
So they have everything on all our buildings. If they come to us with what they've done in the past, we're thinking we're going to be around this, because it's, as I said before this meeting to you and Mr. Reinhardt, it's really tough to have this decision publicly when we're sitting and saying, well, what's the cost? Nobody has that idea. So if Dewey, I don't know if it's covered under a retainer or not, but if Dewey can give us, an idea, hey, by doing this, we think you're going to be around here, then we can have that discussion of looking at different architects and things.
But Frank, we can do that based on the numbers. The numbers that they gave us are what, only 2 years old?
Numbers for PACS?
For all the buildings. Remember they
had capital improvement plan?
Yes.
Yeah, it has been updated. Never been formally presented to the board.
Right.
But there are numbers in the capital improvement plan. But I don't know that they're associated with moving.
I'm talking about the movement.
The move, I think they have to go in price.
Right.
But as far as the buildings overall, in other words, where they talked about changing the doors, doing roofs and things on buildings and everything, based on square footage and everything, and they had worked based on the number of classrooms, based on the number of students in a building and everything. They actually had cost figures down, rough estimates of what it would cost to have all those types of projects done. And they actually detailed out what it included in each one, what the concepts were. And maybe we ought to go back, I agree that maybe getting the pricing on doing the move, but the rest of it.
Well, the rest of it we pretty much have. We just didn't present.
They ought to come back and let's present it once, because that'll give us an idea on each facility. Because they had it broken down by facility, and in some cases, like the high school, they had the roof broken out, if I remember correctly, and yet we have done some of the roof projects and everything out there to complete them. So which means they're off the list at this point, correct?
The phase 2 phases or 3 phases at the high school.
When we updated that, we removed some of the projects that were done in the past several years. So you wouldn't see them on the newest facility report.
I think it's appropriate to point out now, when we were talking about this, that we talked about maybe resurrecting, or if you will, an ad hoc committee on the facilities and bring up this capital improvement plan again. Look at all those things that were identified. Back then there were some priority orders. Maybe they changed. Some things are off the list. And I think in conjunction with this, we should be addressing that and looking at everything district-wide, which I think is where you're going.
Exactly, and I think the whole board has to help make that, because we're the ones that are going to be accountable for that and everything, and especially if we have to figure out how we're going to fund it as well.
While we're talking about selling the academy and doing this fifth grading as well.
Well, I think it should be the Buildings and Grounds Committee taking the lead, bringing it back to the full board, all the information, as soon as possible.
As long as they don't prioritize the site and step off. And I know I sit with part of that group, but I think everybody has to hear as much of the details and know as much of the details as possible.
Well, they should know everything. The Buildings and Grounds Committee really has no business to chop and move anything. Whatever they get, they bring.
I wasn't trying to suggest.
No, I know that, but I mean, it should all come to the full board, so the full board can make an informed decision. So I think we should definitely do that. And I mean, we could see what Dewey talk about an engineer or
an architect. I think an architect plays into certain pieces that you do, and it provides, as I said, the checking balance. The other thing that comes into this that we have to look at would be that ESCO plan, which they're in the middle of investigating right now, preparing a report. And Frank, based on your recommendation, which was good, we were only doing, for say, phase one was the investigation and the documentation, which may play into some of this now, because as we talk, what would we do in each building and how much money would we spend? So as that eventually comes to a conclusion, that will probably play into this, for informational purposes.
And I believe they're wrapping that up very soon, so we'll be meeting, the committee, with the Buildings and Grounds Committee, myself, will be meeting with them, once we get a date from them, to hear what they have, and then that'll come to full board as well, just to hear what they found in their recommendations. Okay. Is there any other questions regarding Mr. Reinhardt and the facility? I mean, do we need a vote? We don't need a vote to have Dewey come back with numbers.
Depending on cost you do.
How much
I think that it would be, if I could just respond there, I think it would be appropriate for the board to endorse endorse us to speak with Dewey and come back with something.
So you want to vote at the end of the month?
I think that's appropriate.
Well, it doesn't matter to me. It just takes longer.
I know.
I would write
a consensus.
Write up the parameter. I don't think there's a problem with it, but I would write up the parameters of what we're talking about doing. Not this whole thing. We just said here for the purpose of moving.
Right.
Yeah. Well, now you bring up an interesting point that if there's a consensus tonight that that's what we'd like to do, then we can talk to them. Because I will say to you that if they're not available to provide these numbers, then I would suggest we go somewhere else. Because I think it's that critical for us to get moving and marching down this road. To at least at this stage, gathering the information.
So, John, what you're saying is they could end up in 2 weeks when we come back here and vote to authorize actually them doing it, you'd have that discussion and they'd say, well, maybe it's not appropriate for us, or we're going to need certain specialists in, and so therefore the cost of this may be adjusted accordingly. And then
we have an idea.
Right, and so then what we're going to be voting on in 2 weeks will be potentially what the cost for them plus specialists, as you talk about technology and other things, would be.
Now let's say that. Let me ask this question: If the board again believes that securing the advice of an architect is something we should do, is that a conversation for the entire board, or is that?
Well, I think it would definitely be the conversation for the entire board, since we're going to have to pay.
Would you like the building? Yeah, right. Would you? Yeah, and architectural services would be, it's generally a board. It is a board decision. But once again, in order to get us rolling, would that be? Do you see that as happening with the building and grounds group making a presentation or making a recommendation after talking with architects? Or would you like the whole board to do that?
I think my personal opinion will give you the whole board here is from architects. Maybe the building and grounds group to talk with Dewey and understand what pieces of the project can be broken out and you don't need them on, and what pieces you do need them on. Yeah. That may be a direction.
Okay.
But well, then why don't we hear what Dewey has to say about what we need? If we agree, yes, we need them on that, then we do RFQs or RFPs like we've always done, and then the top three or whatever will come to full board, and then the full board will pick the top three, vote on it, and then we have our architect.
Yeah, but again, let's find out where they are first.
Right,
yeah.
Absolutely. Which we'll hear in 2 weeks. Which we should hear in 2 weeks if we can.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want you to misinterpret my desire to move quickly as trying to rush it. but I've been through enough projects to know how long these things can take. And we tend to be at a disadvantage in public schools with all of these kinds of things because our schedule, for us to do something mid-year, for example, when a project is ready to go, let's say it ends in February, the question becomes, is it fair to kids and families to make major adjustments in February or wait till the start of another school year? Point being, in businesses generally don't have to worry about that, but in schools that often plays a factor, so that the timing and the movement forward is often stymied because of the start and the stoppage of school. So I don't want you to misinterpret my desire to want to rush through this, but I don't want to see us really get into a very long and drawn out affair here, especially up front. So
before I go to public comment, is there a consensus? Is everybody pretty much?
I got a couple more things here.
Oh, you got more?
Yeah. So as we want to look at Dewey and everything, we're going to consider all facilities, right? I know that, at different times Cunningham Stadium has come up. And I think we have to be aware of that because depending on the situation there, we don't want to be putting all our funds one place and find out we have to do something there that's going to be required for whatever reason, let's say. I know you have, and under the high school will probably fall the pool issue, yes, right? And so that'll be another issue that comes up. And I mean, that could be actually an academic issue as well.
If you remember, Bob, what Dewey has is a breakdown on every building, yes, the stadium, the pool, fields, what needs to be done. So that's what is going to be brought back.
That's what I was after.
We're going to get all that.
That's what I'm saying. They have to do everything, all facilities, not just, we always kept talking just about the school buildings. Let's make sure it includes everything.
I'm going to make sure it's the pool, the stadium, because they have it all. Dewey did it all. We just never took it from Buildings and Grounds Committee to full board. So now we'll present that at the full board, or at the committee, so everybody will see. It's all the buildings, field house, stadium, swimming pool, everything. So we look at all that. Good. Before we move on, is there a consensus to have Mr. Reinhardt and Mr. Simonetta speak with Dewey to try to put some numbers together for us for 2 weeks?
Yeah. No. The numbers you're coming back with
for the move. For the move.
I thought you were coming back with 2 numbers. Aren't you? You're coming back with the numbers of what it's going to cost for them to do the investigation and everything. Of what it's going to cost for the, if they have to bring some experts in to look at some things that may have to deal with communication lines and all. There's more to this move. I mean, if we want to get down to the nuts and bolts of it, and they may not handle all that. This is where you bring an expert in on this issue, you bring an expert in on that issue. So Dewey's cost is Dewey's cost plus expert costs and everything else, and that's what we're really approving.
But what I'm looking at is what we've done numerous times before. Dewey will come back and say, we're looking at this project to cost this amount of money. This amount of money is going to include communications, it's going to include an architect, it's going to include security personnel, hookup security, whatever it may be. They give us a roundabout numbers the same way they've done on every other project we've ever done since I've been here.
Okay, you're just talking about his rough estimate.
Right.
They
because
really...
if he says, if Dewey, if Arifa or somebody comes back and says, we're looking at $10 million, I don't know how many people are going to say, okay, let's do it.
They might change costing us basically a dime to get the number. That's what it is.
Right.
They're only...
And that's what you're looking for, correct?
But I think there's 2 things here. We're not talking about an architect and all those costs and experts for the move for the academy.
We're looking at whatever Dewey says we need.
You're talking more for the capital improvement plan and all the other projects.
No.
He's talking about whatever Dewey comes back and says we need. If Dewey comes back and says we need an architect with the move.
No. First, there's multiple pieces there. Separate them apart. So your first discussion is with Dewey as far as what's it going to cost to move the students out of the academy and put them over into the middle school.
That's correct. That would be
that's
one piece of information we all need very soon.
Number 2, It's going to be, what's it going to cost for the purpose of moving technology and everything else or anything else that's in that building that we also want to move to another location.
That's correct. Right.
And the cost to do that may include some expert knowledge and everything else.
Right.
And then that's the end of that.
But I mean, that would all come from Dewey in 2 weeks.
Yeah.
I mean, the move from A to Z will
That's
come
it.
from Dewey in 2 weeks. That's what I'm talking about. The move.
But
Everything
now,
in the
that's
thing,
going to be a
right?
ballpark figure, and when he brings his experts in, they may say, oh, well, you missed $100,000 here.
Well, that happens in everything we do.
Well, only when you rush. Because
But that's not what we're not signing off on orders and everything in 2 weeks. But to have the discussion, you need to have ballpark numbers.
Ballpark, yes. And as long as we realize it's ballpark.
Right, absolutely. Because I'm sure, you know, the public, but even myself as a board member, yeah, all this sounds good. Show me the numbers. What's the cost? We have none. That's what we wanted to do prior to this meeting, but some board members didn't want to wait. Get the numbers, and then have the conversation. Get the ballpark numbers. So that's what we're going to get from Dewey, correct? In 2 weeks. Then we can have a full discussion to decide if the board even wants to take on that financial obligation to do the move, if the end just something. So that's what we do in 2 weeks, right?
And don't forget, those numbers are also going to include a good estimate on what we think we're going to get from the academy.
I mean, it's an estimate. You know, we were all from the 811.
That has to be part of the equation.
Yeah.
And, you know, like we always do, we'll go conservative.
I mean, it gets brought up, but I don't know how many people are going to put stock into the revenue coming from the sale because it can sit for 5 years.
I think the bottom line has to be what's the cost going to be to us, and whatever we get off of the sale ends up being the gravy to it.
Absolutely. But I would like to hear what they think the cost would be anyway.
Right.
It's not going to make much. It's not going to make any difference, in my opinion, if we do it or not. But I'd like to hear it anyway. You know, just to see what they think we can get for that building. No, Dewey wouldn't. They'd have to go somewhere else. They'd have to talk with you in your office.
We've already gotten some preliminary information on that.
There is, I believe there is a consensus to get an estimate of what all this move would cost in 2 weeks, correct?
Yeah. Thank you.
All right. Is there anyone from the public who would like to be heard on future facilities use? Seeing none, we're going to go to our chair summary. We are going to hear back about the projected cost and estimate of the move of the facilities. Also, maybe next month in committee, we're going to bring Dewey back and in buildings and grounds, and we're going to hear about all the capital projects that need to be done, from buildings to swimming pool to stadium and everything else. We're going to move to number 5, finance. Mr. Fain.
Over the past couple of years, there was some discussion and everything about the budget and looking at budgets and seeing where we've been and where we're heading. Mike, with his staff, has started to present, has put together a chart showing where we've been and just this future year. You know, we've always talked about where's the majority of the dollars going and everything in a sense, and so they put a chart together that for us to look at. This is a lot easier to look at in summary and see percentage-wise where the money is as compared to having to go through 1,000 pages in a notebook or whatever. And that's coming around now. Mike, comments?
Concerns? Comments, concerns?
No, it's just that, you know, we've, over the last couple of years, we've done this in that pie chart form, that one page. This is a little more detail. And, you know, it's just important to point out that even when you get down, when you expand it, it's even less of a percentage of the budget that we really have that flexibility to move around and deal with. The other information on the budget, just an update that nothing has changed since we reported it. In 2 weeks, we're going to be going for final approval with the numbers that you saw. We have nothing additional from the state at this point, but it's important that if there are any questions you've acquired in the last month or so, please let me know. I'll get back to you and So we're ready to go for the meeting in 2 weeks.
Yeah, I mean, if there's any questions tonight on those dollars where you think where it's going to be, because in 2 weeks, it's going to be adopting the budget, and once you adopt it, you have to fund the budget. And that's where you end up setting your millage rates and everything, and setting the rest of the taxes. So, any questions on that?
There's nothing we can do about it, but if you guys look at like the Peasville Street, 11-12 school year to 15-16,
Now you see the value
I
of
mean,
this.
geez, that's just.
Bottom line, more than 80% of the budget is tied up between our bond leases and our salaries and benefits. So it doesn't let you allow the dollars that you have to do anything else with it.
What did you do last year to cut overtime so much? That number is out of line with the rest of the overtime. I mean, it's a small number as a percentage, but it just sticks out as being very half of what it was. It's like a flip.
So 14-15?
Yeah, it's at 244.9, which isn't consistent with the other numbers.
That's not the final number yet.
Yeah, I think that's the way that was the budget number for 14-15,
Yeah.
and I think when the budget was set up, the money was put in other areas. But if you look for next year, it's back up to what.
Yeah, it fits the pattern. Yeah, I just saw that was real low.
And I keep saying this not as an excuse, but when we have this new software come 15-16 school year, you're going to see more consistency in those line items and those expenses.
Okay. The software is what caused a lot of trouble trying to put these numbers together. But additionally, that gets corrected when we do the transfers in July.
You'll see when you go to 14-15 actual a year from now, you'll see it back up in that 500,000 on the actual expenses.
I just thought about mentioning on the 14th of May is the national call to action to call your senators and representatives in this one now and press for adequate funding of public education, but also to get them to really focus on charter schools and come up with some better funding formula and things. And if you just look here at the bottom, 15-16 school year, we're losing $2.6 million to charter schools. So I think if you guys remember, call whoever your representative is and tell them that they really need to change that funding formula regarding the charter schools.
If I may, I have another question. So the number here, just to clarify, the 14-15, that's the actual budget.
That's the
That
current.
is not the actual.
Right.
These are still, so these numbers are not. They can change. But I'm wondering, again, every little bit counts, I guess. Gasoline, diesel fuel, and gasoline costs. Do you see a decrease in that? Looking at the numbers that have been coming in the past year, because the gasoline price over the past year have been significantly lower than they were in the past 5 or 6
And
years.
the bids come in each year. When we rebid it, they have come in lower each year.
Okay, so and it's little things, just out of curiosity.
And that's going to probably be a good example where some of the 587 there is going to be transferred out and it's going to bump back up into the overtime.
Okay.
Other questions? Just want to make sure we're prepared when we get here in 2 weeks that we realize we're going to vote on the budget, we're going to vote on the funding. If not, that will conclude my report for tonight.
Any public who would like to be heard on finance items? Seeing none.
If I could add one thing on the finance.
I'm sorry, sir, you're not public.
We can't. No, we can't add it because you told me we should hold. It wasn't on the agenda. When we,
Oh, you're talking about something else?
Yeah.
I just don't want to bring up things that are not on the agenda, and then if the paper or on the web pick it up, people can say, wait a minute, I checked the agenda, I wouldn't be there for that, and you didn't have it on. So we'll bring that up next meeting. Any public to be heard on non-agenda items only? Seeing none. Board members, I need you in the back right away. We have a 2-minute executive session. At this time, can I have a motion to adjourn? All those in favor? Aye. Opposed? Meeting closed.